that's the edge
using
plate.
essence.
And I'm going to use some mineral spirits to take the asphaltum off of the other plate. And then I pass the other plate around so you can take a look at that. And look at that, you can see already, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
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 So I think that's really cool. That's what I love about that process. It's just fantastic. And to make sure I get all of the paint off. I hate these big caps. I'm going to take some acetone and make sure I get all of that off, all the spray paint. Voila. Where's my toy? There it is, there it is. Okay. Ah, ooh. Whoa. Here, have a look.
So the purpose of that toy is you can go and look, and if you're not happy with a line, you can go back.
Yeah, I could go back and maybe do something about it. Yeah. Yeah, hold it flush against the, yeah, that's right. So you can see the topography now. It's got some edging in it, so that's good. So the plates are they're done as far as I'm concerned at this point. The only thing I haven't done with those plates that should be done before you actually start printing is to bevel the edges, because right now they're just a square edge. And when I put them into the press and I press them, if you've got the edge of that zinc plate, it will tear the paper. But if you bevel them, if you put a little bit of an angle around the edge of the plate, it'll create a smooth surface that the
How do you
press.
bevel?
I just get a piece of sandpaper. I have one of those hand sanders that works really well, or just a file. Yeah, because that's actually a pretty soft metal, and you can sand it down. In fact, if you mess up a plate and you really hate it, you can just get one of those sanders and sand the plate down, and then just etch it again, start all over.
The advantage to this type of etching over woodblock prints is
well, this you can, well,
the degree of
detail is much greater. Wood blocks to me are kind of fun, but I don't like the way wood blocks print for the most part. It's a very different process. It's a very rough process. You can't get the fine detail.
There's some wood, wood cuts.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, these are actually, Mary Lee did a fantastic job with some of these. There's actually a lot of work in there, but
but it's a different quality.
It's a different sense. You can't get a nice gray tone because you can't cut to the level that I mean, we're looking at these etchings at 60 times, and we're seeing, I mean, you can't cut like that into a piece of wood. So you can't get that level of gradation. Yeah, you could actually say something to that.
You actually can get that fine lines in engraving.
Right. Oh, right. Yeah, that's true.
Different tools.
Yeah.
It also requires special wood, very hard wood and
Yeah.
grain.
Well, what about a lino print?
That's a different thing.
I mean,
That's another one that's kind of rough. But you're right about that, because I remember I saw a print show in Dallas like a couple of years ago, and there was a wood print that was that big by an artist at the time of the Civil War, and I can't remember his name. But it looked like it was unbelievable, and it was a woodblock print. And it had an incredible, I mean, an incredible amount of
That's
detail.
probably a wood engraving.
It must have been an
That's what
engraving.
they use for newspapers,
Right.
for photography,
Yeah.
they use wood engraving.
Yeah, because I was looking at that and going, he didn't do that with the tools I have at home, I'll tell you that,
Yeah.
because there was no
Very
way,
fine
there was no way. So, okay, so at this point, I've got that ready. What I've done is I've made up a little bit of ink here. I'm using this stuff. This is from Graphic Chemical. This is a stiff black ink, and then there's some compound that gets mixed with that to kind of loosen it up a little bit. Usually, it's like you have to hold it adjacent to the, hold it right onto the plate like that. Yeah, yeah. So you mix some of this wiping compound into the ink to make it a little bit looser, and then rub it into the plate. So I've generally, like for all the black and whites, I've used these inks, this ink and the wiping compound. It's very thick stuff and it has to really be worked into the plate. I've experimented with color, like these are the same plates I've used for all the black and whites, but I've experimented with color. And this aqua stuff is really good. It comes in these really, really nice bright colors. Again, you get this aqua. You get this over at Texas Art Supply. It's much thinner than this. This stuff is really, really thick. This stuff, the yellow in particular, is really thin. This stuff pours. And so I would put that onto the plate, and I usually just use a tool like this to put the ink onto the plate. And that's how I did those. So I used that, they're kind of making mono prints with the color. So what I'm going to do today, though, is I'm going to use this black ink, this thick stuff. And I'll ink the plate, and then I'll make a couple of. So can I get one of the plates? What do we got? All right, there, that's the etched one. Great. Okay, so let's do that.
Let's see which one it is.
Yeah, that's the etched plate.
Okay.
So I use these things to put the ink down. You pick those up, yeah, just a plastic, so it's soft, of course. Then you get these at Home Depot for like $1, and it works really well. And I'll just work the ink into the plate in different directions. And I don't have to cover the whole plate. And then this stuff is called tarlatan, or this is really a tarlatan substitute, which is tarlatan is kind of a cottony material. And it's kind of like it got a weave to it, so it picks up a lot of ink. And this stuff is synthetic, so it's pretty durable. It won't leave fibers on the plate. So I've got a dirty one and a clean one, so I take the dirty one and I use that and I rub clockwise, counterclockwise, and try and work it into all those areas where the line has been etched. And then now it's looking very nice. Now I can take the cleaner one.
Is that the Akua wiping cloth or?
Yeah, I think it is an Akua.
That's not what's really well.
Yeah, it is really good. It's not very expensive. I've been using the same big ream of it for a long time.
Yeah. It works way better than the standard tool.
Yeah. So I'm going to wipe that off. And then if I want to clean it even more, there's all kinds of things you could wipe it with. Newsprint will clean it the most, I think. Or paper towel, because a paper towel will work its way into the etch. And I may not have taken all the wax off here, but I think you'll get the idea. There we go. Okay, so there it is. It's a little smudged on one side, but you get the idea of it. So, paper towels and rubber gloves. It's like you go through 1,000 of them every time you work. Now you could just put the paper in a bath, but I just do this. And just spray it. Just to get it nice and wet.
And the paper is?
This is printmaking paper. Yeah, I mean, just good old, I just make sure I get stuff that says printmaking on it. And Texas Art Supply, or wherever. So I let the paper get nice and wet, and then what I'll do is I'll blot it out a little bit, and then we'll run the whole thing through the press. So I've got my press. I got some newsprint down on the bottom. I got this heavy acetate, very heavy acetate, that I've marked so I have an idea where the center of the plate is going to be. And I ended up, you know, I used to buy this 005 or 003 acetate, and I would find that sometimes when I ran it through the plate, it ran it through the press, it would crinkle. And when the plastic crinkles and the paper crinkles, and then the print looks like crap. So I started to use this stuff. This stuff is really thick. It's actually meant for printmaking, but it's really thick, and I'm thinking this is what I really want to use. So here's my press. I'm going to put this. I wish I would get cleaner. There you go. I had a printmaker come and tell me, you know, you just use the back of your hand. So they say. I think that works. So that's, you know, he was a professional, so he told me what to do. So anyway, let's see how that looks. It looks like it's going to be a little messy, but I think you'll get the idea. So this press, it doesn't have like meters on it to tell me how hard it's going to press. So I'm just going to kind of eyeball it. I usually I can feel it when it goes over the plate, and that's usually good enough. So I'm going to go ahead and wet that. So it's still plenty damp. I put that on top. Now it's a small press, so I push it in all the way here. I make sure it's centered, and then I put the blankets on top. And I can adjust the pressure a little bit. I have to make sure that everything is aligned correctly, because sometimes the rollers here will get stuck on the hubs, and then the roller's like that when it should be like that. You know, there's 100 things that can go wrong, and I found all of them. Okay, so that's pretty good pressure. I can feel it. I have to work to turn it, you know, so down on one end and then back. All right, not bad. Look at that. Not bad. So it's a little messy because I was in a hurry and maybe didn't take all the wax off. We got the other plate. Oh, okay. Everybody's having fun with the microscope. It's a good toy, right? Guess what everybody's getting for Christmas? It's like $12 on Amazon.
How much?
$12.
Oh.
I mean, yeah, I mean, everybody should have one. I mean,
What's the brand?
And what is that thing called, the toy?
Carson, I think it's just called a microscope. I'll have to look up exactly what the title, what it's called, or what's it called, a jeweler's loop. It's kind of like the same family.
What happens if you don't wet the paper?
I don't know, I haven't tried that. Mary Lee, do you have any comments on that?
I do it both ways. It's just the quality of the ink. When you have the paper wet, the ink sinks in a little bit more, and it looks a little more velvety.
T-shirt with paper fibers getting into the lines. It's wet.
Into the grooves of the plate, you mean?
Yeah.
I would think so, because the ink itself is oil-based, so it's really hydrophobic, right? So you'd think the water would act as a resist, but I think making the paper more flexible is probably greater than the hydrophobia of the...
And for maybe paper usually has less sizing than like watercolor paper.
Oh, maybe that's why, yeah.
Yeah, it expands and contracts.
Okay,
Wet paper.
there you go. Some people have been to school here. Thank you.
Well, one of the reasons to wet the paper when you're doing etching is the ink is being pulled out of your lines, and when the paper is wet, it does a good job.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't tried putting the dry paper through, so,
It does work, it's different quality.
okay. Be another thing to experiment with, as if I don't have enough, right? So I'm trying to rub, this one here now, I want to rub the ink across the whole plate, because the whole plate should be black, or very dark gray.
How do you get the color variations when you're using the color inks? Do you paint them on?
Yeah, I just applied the different color inks with this flat tool. And it took a lot of work because I was trying, yeah, I know. It was problematic. But it was kind of good because what it did is it made the inks blend in certain ways and created a very rough look about it. I kind of liked that. And I just used this tool. I didn't like the color. When I did the color, I didn't use the Tarleton because these plates were designed for black and white images. So there's no texture, like in this area, there's no texture of the plate over there because it wasn't meant to hold ink. But I want the yellow ink to stay, so I don't want to wipe it, because if I wipe it, it'll end up being white. I don't want it to be white, I want it to be yellow. So I would scrape the ink off with just with this, which would leave a lot of ink on the plate. And then when I printed it, it came out like that. So it's just another thing that I had to kind of play with. You know, if I were intending the plate to be color from the beginning, I would not have scraped it down that much, right? I would need to leave texture everywhere, except where I didn't want it to have that color. But it's also unusual to do a colored plate just from a single plate. A lot of people will do multiple plates with different colors on them. But I wasn't looking for that effect. I was looking for something really loose. And so that really worked for me.
Did you get blending when you wiped the ink off?
Yeah. And it was really important that I wipe it in a certain way. So like I would wipe, when I was putting the blue down, I'd wipe the blue along the contours so that I wouldn't wipe the blue into the yellow. Or I wouldn't wipe the yellow too much into the blue. I mean, a little bit, but not a lot. You know. So I ended up with these really nice looking effects, I think.
Yeah.
All right.
So you laid all the colors on the plate at one time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I said I didn't do multiple registers.
Yeah.
Because it's really hard to do with,
Yeah,
it's just hard to do, period. It's just hard to do.
It's reductive or something.
Yeah. So that method is supposedly called a la poupée. Because you're supposed to use a bundle of cloth or something to put the ink down, but I didn't.
Yeah.
But I
That's
didn't.
a felt thing.
Yeah, I didn't do that.
There's also nothing to prevent you from just doing watercolor over the top of the front either.
Yeah. Voila, that's looking pretty good.
But I got some prints I'm going to tell you on this, so that's what he did. Did the prints. Everything he had watercolor.
So I can polish that up and you can really see that, you know, where, I mean, you've got pure zinc on there now, it's not holding any ink. And I can really, yeah, can you do it? Can you see it? You can really see Archway could shine. So that always tells me, you know, that I'm on the right track. You know, a lot of times, you know, I can ink the plate and look at it and I can get a pretty good idea of how the print's going to look. Because the dark areas will be darker and the shiny areas are going to be white. So, you know, that really works out.
When you do your colored plates, do you think you can get more than one print out of one plate without cleaning it off?
I haven't tried that. I probably could. You know, it would look different. It would look weaker, of course. Well, that's how I did the George Washington thing, right?
Oh, okay.
Because I just kept printing the same plate over and over and over, and it just kept fading. All right, so there we go. Another pair of gloves bites the dust. And there it is. We do it again. Not bad. Not bad. Yeah, say I got a lot of, say I don't know whether I over-etched the plate or not in that area, or maybe I didn't put the ink down very well. But if I was making like a figure out of this, I'd be unhappy, because I really wanted, if I wanted the background to be pure black. That's been my biggest challenge when I've done all of my etchings, is that I want a black background, a solid black background, and trying to get that exactly right has been really hard, because it's all a matter of like controlling the etching while you're doing aquatinting, really. It's very difficult to do that, but you get the idea how this stuff works. So that's the process, you know, and here's some of my plates. You know, I tell you, I did a lot of experiments. I've got pages of things like this where I ran test plates at different pHs, or I sprayed it differently, and then see what, you know, how things worked out. Thank you. All kinds of testings that I've done, like, you know, mad scientist, in order to get things to try and figure out what the process is like. And I'm still trying to figure it out. There's a lot of variables that are hard to understand, hard to pin down, and to see what their effects are. But these are some samples, and of course I've got other ones around, so I think that's most of what I wanted to say. Do you have any questions for me?
So I have,
Go
I
ahead.
have an envelope where the artist also did embossing. Theoretically, she said, all in one pass. So how would you do embossing on an image like that?
I don't know, I haven't done embossing.
Oh,
Anybody want to comment on that? Do you know anything about that, Mary Lee?
Well, I've done it, so I don't have any real comment about it. I haven't done enough to really comment on it.
I mean, like, kind of like the wood paper feels raised on the outside of the dessert.
Right, so,
What is that called, a colorgraph?
Something like that, yeah. But I mean, as far as I know, the way to get that effect is to have really deep grooves.
Right.
Yeah.
I would
And no
think
ink,
so.
And basically no ink, right? But you still have to run through a process to get enough pressure to force the paper into the slate.
Yeah.
Even though you don't, but it requires a deeper etch.
it requires.
I've never tried a deeper etch.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Does this process degrade the plates, making prints, does that degrade the plates?
In theory, you know, the more you manhandle the plates, you'll wear down the zinc, but I haven't really seen that yet. I haven't seen it, but
You'd have to make a lot of prints.
you'd have to make a lot. You'd have to. Well, I think that, you know, every time I run that spatula over the zinc, I know I got to be wearing it down a little bit. Even though the plastic is softer than the zinc, I figure it's gonna wear it down slightly. But I've made as many as 10 or 20 prints off of the plate, and I haven't noticed it. But I imagine if you went way out there,
200 though.
yeah.
You're better off getting number 2 than number 200.
Probably, yeah. I mean, I imagine the first one is closer to the artist's vision than the later ones, yeah.
Maybe.
That's
I mean, it was designed for commercial printing, right? It's
Right.
an entire process, so
Yeah.
they should be able to have quite a bit. Dry point's a little bit.
Dry point is very limited, because you're not really etching into the plate,
No.
yeah, not significantly, yeah. Anything else?
Thank you.
Well, thanks for coming. I think everybody should buy a print to support the artist.